All right, you got up, you stretched your legs, you drink some water. Drinking water is important. Remember to drink your water. Okay, let's get down to business to finish chapter 4. So this is going to be our third part of chapter 4. Isn't that just great? That means that we're to the end of the first midterm material. So remember, midterm 1 has chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4 on it. And now you know, after this lecture, you're going to know all the information. So you can work on the practice problems, you can work on the homework, you can work on everything else, you can talk to me, you can come by office hours, you can go to review day, and then we have the midterm exam. So that's super exciting. Congratulations, you made it this far. So let's jump right on into it and let's finish up chapter 4, huh? Alrighty, well, let's go ahead and get set up real fast and fix the little screen things. Okie dokie. So with this, we're going to start with the income elasticity of demand. So what we've been learning this entire time is the price elasticity of demand. This is the main one that you're going to need to be able to calculate and interpret for your test. Now, we do have 3 other equations that we're going to have. We're going to have the income elasticity of demand, we're going to have the cross price elasticity, and we're going to have the price elasticity of supply. Now, you're not necessarily going to have to calculate each and every one of those. You are going to need to know what they mean, though. So if I gave you one where I said, hey, the income elasticity of demand is 5, or -5, or 3, or 2, or 0, what does that actually mean? You're going to have to figure that out. So it's going to be looking at this, and you have to know what they're necessarily trying to interpret. So the price elasticity of demand, we were looking at changes in the quantity that we were demanding based upon the changes in the prices that we had. So we had a price change, and then we had a subsequent change in the amount that, or the quantity that people were demanding of a good or service. And we were comparing the relationship in between the two to figure out if we had an elastic or an inelastic good. So the income elasticity of demand, oh, I hope I'm sharing my screen. Yeah, I am sharing my screen. Okay, measures how the quantity demanded of a good responds to a change in income. So sometimes it's not necessarily that the price changes, right? Because like price could drop for candy bars and I feel rich because I can afford all the candy bars. But let's say the price doesn't change. Let's instead say I want candy bars and I had a massive raise, right? Just a massive raise. Well, then I can still go crazy and buy all the candy bars because my income has gone up. I'm able to purchase more. So how the quantity of a good or service, how I'm changing the amount that I want based upon a change in my income. So did I get a raise and my income go up? Or did maybe I lose my job, or I'm temporarily displaced, or maybe I lost a contract and my income goes down? When it goes up or down, how does that affect the quantity that we're demanding of something? So this is going to have a very similar formula. So let's remember, let me set it up so we can switch over. I realized that we were going to need more examples. Don't worry, I brought the mac and cheese. Okay, all right, so let's get into it. Let's think a little bit about this, oops, not cross price, income elasticity of demand. So let's go over to our handy dandy writing screen and find wherever I put the pen. Haha, there it is. So, whoops. So far, we have the price elasticity of demand, right? Notice I put in red right here. This is the main equation for this chapter. Boom. Oops. Right here. This is the main one I'm going to be asking you to calculate. The other ones you have to at least be able to interpret, or if I give you the numbers to plug in, you got to divide one versus the other. Okay. So this next one that we're going to be focusing on, this is going to be called, here. Where's the thing? I wanted to make sure that I was going to be writing it right. The income elasticity of demand. And it's essentially, let's see, going to be equal to our percentage change in quantity demanded. So that part's going to remain the same, right? We're still wondering how much our purchasing habits are going to change relative to something. The thing is, with the price elasticity of demand, this was relative to a change in price. Instead, now we're going to have a percentage change in income, which I'm going to represent by I. So we're going to wonder, how much is something changing relative to my income? So that's really important to think about. And that's because we're going to have these relationships. Let's think about it. If I get a massive raise, I'm going to buy a lot more pens. I'm going to buy a lot more paper clips. I'm going to buy a lot more day planners. I'm going to buy a lot more Wii U's. Well, maybe not. They don't really make games for these anymore. Super rare now, though, because apparently people learned how to hack them. Anyways, I'm going to buy more things, right? Income goes up. I tend to buy more things. Of most things. That's the cool part. So you notice how we have, like, for our price elasticity of demand, if it's less than 1, it's inelastic. If it's equal to 1, it's unit elastic. If it's greater than 1, it's elastic. We have similar tips and tricks for our income elasticity of demand. So here, let's go ahead and think a little bit about this. Well, let's say, here, we're going to do the first one in purple. Let's say that, let's make this elasticity of income. Quantity demand. Yeah, there we go. That's what I'm going to call it. Let's say that this is greater than 1. Well, what would that really mean? Well, that would mean for maybe a 5% increase in my income, I might buy 10% more things. Let's think about something relatively elastic. Mac and cheese, right? This is the good mac and cheese. Yeah, look, that's name brand. That's craft right there. So if I'm getting an income increase, I'm getting a raise, I'm going to buy more of that name brand craft mac and cheese. I'm going to be real excited about that. So if I get a 5% raise, maybe instead of buying 2 boxes, I buy 3 boxes. That's a 50% increase. Well, that 50% increase in the amount that I'm buying is way more than the 5% increase in my salary. But am I happy? So happy. So if this is a much larger than 5% change in the quantity that I'm demanding, I'm going up by 50% because I'm going from 2 boxes to 3 boxes. Relative to a 5% change in income, well, that's going to be equal to 1. We're going to call this elastic, right? Because I'm buying more than my income went up. And I'm also going to call this a normal good. Now, there's 2 types of goods, normal goods and inferior goods. Normal goods are ones when you get a raise, you buy more of it. You lose your job, you buy less of it, right? Kraft mac and cheese, this is normal good. This is clearly something that when I have a raise in my income, I'm going to purchase more of it. I think it's great. This would be an elastic normal good to me because I'm going to buy a lot more than what I would have originally bought after a raise. Now let's think of another one. Let's say that I have my elasticity of income for quantity demand, and let's say that it's going to be less than 1. Let's say it's still positive, right? So it's going to be greater than 0. Well, what would I call this? Well, that's something, let's think what that would mean. That would mean that maybe for a 10% increase in my income, maybe I increase the amount I buy of something by 1 or 2%. So gasoline, okay? If I get a giant raise at work, which, you know, may not happen as often as I like. Well, let's say I get a giant raise at work. I'm getting a 10% increase or bonus. Okay, well then I'm feeling rich. Maybe I might go for a couple long drives and increase my consumption of gasoline. Now, am I going to drive 10% more than I already did? No, because honestly, I drive to campus and I drive home. It's just if I have a humongous raise, I might also like stop by the custard shop and get custard on my way home, and that's like my extra bit. It's not an additional 10% of driving to my day, right? So the extra amount of gasoline that I consume, that's going to go up. It's going to go up, but it's not going to go up nearly as much as when my income went up. If that happens, if we have a raise in income and a raise in the amount of a good or service that we're using, but that's less than the percentage change in our income, well, that's in between 0 and 1. Well, that's still a normal good. I'm using more gasoline, right? So this is still a normal good. But we're going to call this relatively inelastic. There we go. I can't type today. I'm so sorry for my handwriting. But it's inelastic because I don't really drastically change how much I'm using of it, right? Like I'll drive a little bit more, but I'm not going to drive 10% more compared to a 10% raise. Okay, then let's think about one last situation. Let's say that our elasticity, our income elasticity of demand, let's say that it's going to be, oops, I just realized what I did. Some people are probably writing their notes just like, what is that? Okay, so in this top one, we were greater than 0, right? So we were in between 0 and 1. In this one down here, we're going to be less than 0. So let's have a negative number, because in income elasticity, a negative number can happen. Well, let's think about what that would mean. That means maybe for a 10% increase in income, I buy less of something. Well, does that necessarily make sense? Sure it does, right? This is ramen noodles. I don't know if y'all have ever seen them before, but I'm assuming that you probably have. They're real cheap. You can get them in between 10 and 15 cents from any Aldi or any corner store or anywhere else. I lived off of these as a grad student because it turns out being a grad student doesn't pay very well. Crazy, right? But then I eventually went from grad student to professor. Well, when that happened, I made some changes in my life, right? I went from making, you know, $20,000 a year to take classes and occasionally teach a class, which they pay for your tuition too, so I guess it's kind of technically more than that, but about $20,000 a year. I went from that to significantly more than that amount, right? I mean, technically you can look up all of your professor salaries online, but I don't really like to spell out numbers. Significantly more than $20,000 though. Like my income went up. So what did I do? How did my buying patterns change? Well, first we had our normal goods. So I went from making 20,000 to a lot more than 20,000. What did I do? I bought a lot more of the name brand mac and cheese because I could, and it's great. I have the name brand tea. I have the name brand mac and cheese. That's a real cushy life that you get when you eventually graduate, right? Paying off student loans until I die, but you know, when you eventually graduate, you tend to buy more of the good things. What did I buy less of? The ramen noodles, right? I used to eat these all the time. It was a regular meal multiple times a week. Now I have them more as a novelty item that I take to class to use as an example. I have maybe a packet of ramen once every few months. So that means that I had a large increase, percentage increase in my income. So the bottom half of this equation went up by a lot. And then the quantity demand, the top part of the equation, went down. I actually demanded less of something. So if the top half of the equation is negative and the bottom half of the equation is positive, that means that this is going to be something that's less than 0. If our income elasticity of demand is less than 0, we're going to call this right here, here we go, an inferior good. Inferior goods doesn't necessarily mean they're bad. Ramen's not bad. It's just not something you buy when you have more money. The more money I have, the more name brand mac and cheese I buy, and the less ramen noodles I buy. These are normal goods. When my income goes up, I buy more of them. When my income goes up, I buy less inferior goods. It goes the opposite way too. Let's say I lost my job. Tomorrow I come in and they say, oh, your students complain that you talk about food too much and they're just so miserable, you're out of a job. Okay, well, if that happened, then I would buy way less of this name brand mac and cheese, and I'd buy way more ramen noodles at that point. So when your income goes down, if I had a negative at the bottom, I'd have an increase at the top. So it'd still work out to a negative. These are inferior goods. These are normal goods. That's the difference. I'm going to ask you the difference on your test. Okay, all right. Let's do a couple more real fast. So let me go back to black. Let's section this piece off. Oops. I'm still trying to figure out how to do straight lines on this thing. All right. So with our income elasticity of demand, what have we now realized? If income elasticity is greater than 1, normal good, income elastic. Between 0 and 1, normal good, income inelastic. Less than 1, or what, less than 0, inferior good. The next one's going to be cross elasticity of demand. So we're wondering what the percentage change in quantity demand is relative to the percentage change in the price of a substitute or complement. Okay, so do I have a substitute or complement up here? Let's go for the tin of nail polish. All right, so we have top coat and another top coat and some shiny thing. All right. We have an example now. Let's think about the cross price elasticity. Okay, so this is like the base. It's the color. The color's real cool, and then you put a top coat on top of it so that your nails don't chip, so they don't look like what my nails look like right now, which are actually a complete mess. I need to redo them, but I just haven't bothered, right? So we have our normal color, and then we have our top coat that goes on top of it. These tend to be complements. They're something that I would, you know, use together. So if there's a price change in one, if the price of top coat skyrocketed, how is that going to affect how I demand the normal nail polish? Well, let's go ahead and look that out in an equation. Hold on, let me set this up real fast. So our cross price elasticity of demand, what we're going to be looking at is our percentage change in our quantity demand of one good. So let's call this good A, relative to a percentage change in the price of a different good. Let's call this good B. So if the price of top coat changed, how does that affect the quantity that I'm going to demand of the base coat, right? Because those are complements. Let's look about the situation of what complements would be. Well, okay, let's think about this logically. We're going to have, let's do this one in green. We're going to do this one in green. Let's say complements. Remember, complements are things that you tend to use together. Base coat and top coat, peanut butter and jelly, peanut butter and bananas, peanut butter and jam. I just like kind of peanut butter, if you can't tell. Peanut butter and chocolate in a fast break. Okay, other things, left shoes, right shoes, hot dogs and hot dog buns, things that tend to go together. So if the price went up for top coat, would I buy more or less of base coat? Because now painting my nails is way more expensive because top coat's more expensive. Well, then I'm probably going to buy less top coat, but that also means I'm going to buy less base coat, right? So that means that as this price goes up for my top coat, the quantity I want of my bottom coat goes down. That means I'm going to have a negative on top of a positive. That means that our complements are where, let's just call this cross price elasticity of demand is less than 0. That means it's just going to be negative, right? If it's a negative number, they tend to be complements. They're items that we use together. Now, let's think about the idea of substitutes. Here, let me go ahead and erase two pieces real fast. Let's erase this. Let's erase this. Let's think about substitutes. So we have our crunchy peanut butter and our gross creamy peanut butter that my partner likes, that they're completely wrong about, and we get in fights about all the time because creamy peanut butter is terrible and the crunchy peanut butter is superior in every way, but apparently they're substitutes for each other. So let's go ahead and think about that. Okay, so in this situation, what would happen to the quantity of the crunchy peanut butter? So let's say, actually, we'll do it in blue so that you can see it. And we got to go back to brush. Let's call this substitute. Okay, because I can either put the creamy peanut butter on my sandwich or the crunchy peanut butter on my sandwich. So, oops, accidentally made a mark. How do I delete that? Boop. Let's say that the price goes up for creamy peanut butter. Okay, price skyrockets for creamy peanut butter. Well, that means we're having less creamy peanut butter in my household. Okay, if we're having less creamy peanut butter in my household because it's way too expensive, what's going to happen to our quantity of crunchy peanut butter, the far superior peanut butter? It's going to increase too, right? If we have a positive divided by a positive, this means that our cross price elasticity of demand is going to be greater than 0. If it's a positive number for cross price elasticity, that just means that these move together. If the price goes up for our substitute, then the amount that I'm going to demand goes up. Okay, so if it's positive, it's a substitute. If it's negative, it's a complement. And that's kind of how these pieces work together. All right, let's put in a little black line right here, and then let's get to our final piece. All righty. So I gotta move all this stuff off my desk. Oh, it's becoming a mess. All right, so for the cross price elasticity, substitutes positive, complements negative. We got this. We got this. All right. So there's a lot about elasticities. Elasticity tells you a lot about what the curve's going to look like, how slanted it is, if it's going to be on the demand side or if it's going to be on the supply side. How is that going to change? How is it going to change relative to complementary products? How is it going to change relative to lots of other things? So this one's not really as important. What we see if we have a demand for something and the price of a burger, i.e. a substitute, let's say this is hot dogs. Okay, if there's a substitute, I'll eat hot dogs or hamburgers, and the price of a hamburger rises, then there's positive cross-price elasticity. I don't want as many hamburgers, I'm going to buy more hot dogs. So hot dogs would increase in demand. It would move outwards. Let's say a complement has a price issue. So let's say that I want my hot dogs and sodas together. I've never had a hot dog or a soda, but I hear they go pretty well together, right? Okay, so we have our demand line. Let's say that the price skyrockets for soda, and I am bougie, and I would like my soda and hot dog together, right? Well, the price raises for a soda, I'm probably gonna buy less hot dogs, so demand would shift inwards. That's just kind of cool. So let's talk about the last piece of the puzzle, and that's gonna be the elasticity of supply. So this one's actually going to be really similar to our price elasticity of demand, and instead we're going to call this the price elasticity of supply. Heck yeah. All right, so we're going to have our percentage change in our quantity supplied relative to a percentage change in price. What does this mean? Well, so far, all of these, let's go ahead and highlight them in orange. Well, we're talking about demand, we were talking about demand, we were talking about demand, we were thinking about our buying patterns as consumers. But what about the suppliers? Because when prices change for any part of the equation, well, then that's going to affect how they really want to operate too, right? If prices go up by 10%, let's say I'm producing, I don't know, I'm producing things. I'm producing mac and cheese and ramen. Somehow ramen becomes a luxury good and everybody's super excited because they watched my fantastic video and everybody just really, really wanted ramen. So ramen sales are up and they've raised the price of ramen tenfold. Now instead of 10 cents a pack, they're $1 a pack. And I produce both of these and I'm saying, ooh, they're gonna pay me how much? Well, now I'm going to produce a lot more of this, right? The quantity that I'm going to supply is going to go up when there's an increase in price. Let's essentially look at what that looks like in the slides. Okie dokie now. So we know that when the demand for a good increases, its equilibrium price goes up. We know that. We know that from chapter 3, right? And the equilibrium quantity of the good is going to increase because more people want it. But we need to find out, does the price raise by a large amount? Does the quantity increase by a little or a lot? What happens? What if they barely change? What's going to happen to the supply side too? We've been thinking about demand, but what about supply? There's still people that have to provide the mac and cheese and ramen, right? So our elasticity of supply just measures the responsiveness of the quantity supplied. It's the responsiveness of suppliers when there's a price change. So we're wondering, is it straight up and down? Is it inelastic? Is it for our quantity supplied that we're supplying X number each time because maybe there's a rule or a policy. Maybe we can only produce so many. So it doesn't matter if you pay me $1 million or $5. I can only produce like 3 knitted blankets a day and that's it. That's the maximum amount no matter how much you pay me. Okay, cool. Supply can sometimes be like that. Sometimes supply can be very elastic. Where like with ramen, you pay me even a cent more per pack of ramen and I'm pushing out millions and millions more packs of ramen because that's a lot of money, right? So we need to know how the suppliers operate. And that's kind of the neat part of the elasticity of supply. So we're going to have 3 examples on the next couple slides. First is going to be perfectly inelastic, then uninelastic, then perfect elastic. Perfectly inelastic is exactly like I said. It looks like an eye. Same thing with price elasticity of demand. It also looked like an eye. If you see an eye, you know, think inelastic, which also starts with an eye. That means that something's not changing. If it's for demand, then we're always demanding the same amount, right? No matter how much it costs. If it's supply, we're always supplying the same amount, no matter how much we're making. That's the idea of like I can only sew so many outfits a day. It doesn't matter how much you pay me. You can pay me billions of dollars. I can still technically only sew so many handmade outfits a day. My supply might be stuck at this one quantity. We also see that a lot in the very, very short term, right? If you come in, like back when I worked at Staples and it was back to school season, which, oh, if you've ever worked retail and back to school season, you know what I'm talking about, right? And people loved calculators, especially back when like I was working and like the TI, what was it, 84 was real popular at the time. Yeah, 83, 84, and then we eventually went into the 90s, and things got weird after that. So the TI-84 was new, and everybody really, really wanted one. So they'd come in and they'd be like, we'll pay you anything, but we want this calculator. Well, if there's only 8 in the stock room, it doesn't matter how much you yell at me or how much you're willing to pay, there's still only 8. I can only supply 8. I have a perfectly inelastic supply in the very, very short term because I only have what's on my shelf to sell. I can't magically make more calculators come out of thin air, right? So that's the idea of that. Unit elastic is more when a 1% change in price means that I'll change my supply by about 1%, right? Then we have the perfectly elastic case of supply. And that's the idea that I'm fairly price sensitive, right? I like producing, like I have to have this one price to be able to produce. You have to pay me 10 cents for ramen for me to produce ramen. And I'm going to produce as much as I possibly can at 10 cents. You pay me 11 cents, doesn't really matter. I'm already producing as much as I possibly can. You pay me $50, I'm already producing as much as I possibly can at these price points, right? I like this one price. I want this price to stay. You pay me 9 cents, I close the factory, I'm done. That's the perfectly elastic case. Notice that these are extremes. These aren't necessarily what happens in the real world. These are the extreme cases. But when we know the extreme cases, we can figure out all the stuff that happens in the middle. And that's the cool part about math. So I don't know why I made individual slides for each of these. There's 2 factors that influence the elasticity of supply. I know I gave you 3 for what affects demand. There's really only 2 for supply that I'm going to mention at this time. 1, resource substitution possibilities, and 2, the time frame of the decisions. All right. What do I mean by that? Okay, so the first one, resource substitution possibilities. The easier it is to substitute among resources used to produce a good or service, the greater the elasticity of supply. Okay, so, what are the ingredients in this? Enriched macaroni. I can't pronounce most of these things. Salt. Okay. And do you have salt? You have salt. Cool. All right. So let's say that I produce pasta related-ish goods. Yeah. Maybe there's a lot of problems with salt, or maybe salt's getting expensive, but I can always switch to a salt-like substitute, or I can switch to a natural sea salt, or I can switch to some other type of salt. There's lots, the more substitutions that are possible for the ingredients that I have in here, well, the more elastic I am with my supply, because that means like, hey, if prices change, I might be able to switch to a cheaper ingredient for what I'm producing, right? So the resource substitutions can kind of affect how elastic that I am. Okay, the other one can be the time frame of the decision. Remember when I was just talking about calculators? Okay, if it's right now, if it's momentary, it's a perfectly inelastic supply. I only have 8 calculators in my store. That will not change in the next few hours. I'm sorry. It's just, I'm getting flashbacks of this fight that I've had at like Black Friday sales or back to school sales at 3, 4 in the morning as people just rush in through the door demanding calculators. And there's only so many. There's not more in the back. I can go get all the ones in the back, but the inventory is going to stay the same. Anyways, so that's perfectly inelastic, right? This is momentary supply. This is the amount that we have right now. We can't magically make more appear. So it's perfectly inelastic. You can pay me $1 million, but I still only have 8 calculators. Okay, then there's the idea of short-run supply. Short-run supply is somewhat elastic, right? That's the idea. Instead of like just right now, you give me like a day or 2. If you give me a day or 2, I can't get a whole nother truck and I can't get the factory to like produce a lot more calculators. But I can go to the surrounding stores and I can be like, hey, these are selling like hotcakes for a lot of money. I need you to give some over to my store, please and thanks. So in the short run, I'm somewhat elastic because I can supply more. I can get a hold of it in some sort of way, but only a little bit more or a little bit less. Then there's the idea of long run supply. In the long run, I can adjust anything, right? I can get new calculator providers. I can set up new accounts. I can get new trucks that come in full of calculators. I can work with the producers, and they can get as many things on my shelves as possible. If you give me enough time, anything is possible. So in the long run, we're much more elastic because we can adjust. If all of a sudden calculators start selling for $1 million a piece, or Texas Instruments, who makes the majority of the calculators, or Casio, if you're one of those Casio calculator people, they can adjust. They can make as many calculators as they need to because you're about to pay them $1 million, right? So in the long run, they can make a lot of these sweeping decisions and changes with the production. But in the moment or in the short run, these are much, much smaller. You're either inelastic or kind of elastic, but not as elastic as you can be in a long run time horizon. After that, I do give you all these definitions in the back of your slides. Please go to your back of your slides to check out these definitions when you get a chance to. Honestly, flashcards are one of the best ways to study for this midterm. No one ever believes me. And then they come to me after the midterm and they say, hey, like, I got a B or a C, but I thought I was going to get an A. What happened? And I'm like, what about the questions that were definitions? I see that almost every one you got wrong was a definition related question. It wasn't a calculation. It wasn't a theory. It was a definition. What happened? And they're like, oh, I didn't remember them. And I said, did you use flashcards? And they tell me no. Then from there, we have two types of students. Half the students will go on and they will start to make flashcards, and they tend to get A's in the class. The other half of the students do not make flashcards, and we have to have the same conversation again after the next exam. Go ahead and cut out the middleman. Go ahead and help out your grade. Just make flashcards. Trust me on this one. I have been teaching this class for a long time. Oh, and with that, congratulations, you have finished all the material for your first midterm. Remember, that's chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. I hope you're excited. We're going to have a review day, and the review day is going to be really fun. Send me any questions that you want me to cover. Send me any sort of, if there's something that you just didn't understand and you want more examples about, send that to me in an email, and I promise I will get a video to you as long as you can give me enough time. So you gotta like get me a day or two before the review day, and as long as you tell me what you're struggling with before then, I'll make sure that I have part of it directly for your problem. Okay, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'm going to talk to y'all later. Okay, bye-bye.